the campground where nobody slept. Welcome to Pine Ridge Campground. If you're planning to spend the night at Pine Ridge Campground, don't. That was the first thing the old gas station owner told me. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't trying to scare tourists. He looked genuinely afraid. I laughed politely and thanked him for the warning. My name is Ethan Brooks, a freelance travel photographer who spends most of the year exploring America's forgotten places. Remote forests, abandoned cabins, empty campgrounds, those were my favorite destinations. Pine Ridge Campground seemed perfect. Hidden deep in the mountains of northern Oregon, it had been closed for nearly 20 years after a series of unexplained disappearances. Official records blamed wildlife attacks. The locals blamed something else. They never slept, the old man whispered before I left. Who? The campers. I frowned. What do you mean? They stayed awake all night. Because something walked through the campground after midnight. The drive took nearly 3 hours. The paved road eventually turned into cracked gravel. Cell service disappeared. My GPS froze. By sunset, I reached a rusted wooden entrance sign. Pine Ridge Campground. The letters were faded, almost swallowed by moss. Beyond the gate, rows of abandoned campsites stretched beneath towering pine trees. Rotting picnic tables, broken fire pits, collapsed tents that looked as though they had been left behind in a hurry. The entire campground was silent. No birds, no insects, not even the wind. It felt as if the forest itself was holding its breath. I'd parked beside the old ranger office. Its windows were boarded shut, but the front door hung slightly open. Inside, dust covered everything. Maps still hung on the walls. A coffee mug sat on the desk. Someone had left in such a hurry that it looked as if they had planned to return the next morning. They never did. I searched the office with my flashlight. Most drawers were empty, except one. Inside lay a worn notebook. The first page read, Campground Rules. Rule 1. Never whistle after sunset. Rule 2. If you hear footsteps outside your tent, do not unzip it. Rule 3. If someone calls your name after midnight, stay completely silent. Rule 4. Whatever you do not fall asleep. I stared at the final line. At first, I assumed it was part of an old ghost story created by campers. Then I turned the page. Every remaining page was filled with handwritten reports. 11:58 p.m. Guests report hearing footsteps. 12:14 a.m. Children claim someone is walking between tents. 1:02 a.m. No one slept. Everyone heard breathing outside. The final entry stopped me cold. 2:47 a.m. It knows when someone falls asleep. Darkness settled over Pine Ridge. The temperature dropped sharply. I pitched my tent near the ranger office and started a small campfire. The flames crackled softly.
For a while, everything seemed normal. Too normal. I checked my watch. 11:47 p.m. The forest remained completely silent. Then, a whistle echoed somewhere deep among the trees. One long, slow, human whistle. It wasn't me. The sound drifted closer. Another whistle answered from the opposite side of the campground. Then another, and another, until whistles surrounded me from every direction. My campfire suddenly went out. Not slowly, instantly. As though someone had blown it out with one breath. The darkness swallowed the campground. I grabbed my flashlight. Its beam cut through the trees. Empty campsites. Broken picnic tables. Nothing moved. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Crunch. 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 Someone was walking slowly between the abandoned tents. They weren't running. They weren't hiding. They wanted me to hear every step. The footsteps stopped outside my tent. A voice, barely louder than a whisper, came from the darkness. Ethan. I stopped breathing. No one should have known my name. Then the zipper of my tent moved. Just a little. The thing outside the tent. The zipper moved another inch. Slowly, carefully, as if whoever was outside didn't want to make a sound. I held my breath. The campground rules flashed through my mind. If you hear footsteps outside your tent, do not unzip it. I gripped my flashlight so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The zipper stopped. Silence. Then, tap. Something lightly touched the fabric of my tent. Tap, tap, tap. 3 slow knocks. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Ethan. The voice returned. Soft, gentle, almost comforting. I know you're awake. I didn't answer. The voice chuckled. Good. Then the footsteps moved away. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I waited several minutes before daring to peek through the small mesh window. The flashlight beam swept across the empty campsite. Nothing. No footprints. No shadow. No person. Only darkness. Then, at the edge of the trees, I saw someone standing perfectly still. A park ranger. His old green uniform was torn and stained with mud. His hat covered most of his face. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He simply stared at my tent. Relieved, I unzipped the tent just enough to whisper, "Hey, are you okay?" The ranger slowly raised one hand. Not to wave, to point. Behind me, a cold chill ran through my body. I turned around. Inside my tent, someone was sitting in the corner. A little girl, no older than 8. She wore a faded pink jacket and hugged a worn teddy bear. Her long black hair covered her face. I gasped and stumbled backward out of the tent. When I looked again, the tent was empty. The little girl was gone. My breathing became frantic. I turned toward the ranger. He had disappeared too. The entire campground was silent once more. Then my flashlight landed on the dirt beside the fire pit. Footprints. Bare feet. Small ones. They circled my tent. Once. Twice. 3 times. But they never led away. As if whoever made them had simply vanished. A gust of icy wind swept through the campground. The old notebook I had found in the ranger office blew open on its own. One page had been folded. It contained a handwritten warning. If you see the child, stay awake. She only visits those who are about to dream. My blood ran cold. I checked my watch. 2:13 a.m. My eyelids felt unbelievably heavy. I hadn't slept, not even for a second. Yet exhaustion crashed over me like a wave. Something wanted me to close my eyes. Just for a moment. I slapped my face and stood up. "No," I whispered. "I'm staying awake." The forest answered with a distant laugh. Then lights began appearing between the trees. Campfires. Dozens of them. One by one, abandoned campsites suddenly glowed with warm orange flames. Around each fire sat silent campers. Families. Couples. Children roasting marshmallows. They laughed as though they were enjoying a perfect summer night. None of them looked at me. It was impossible. The campground had been abandoned for 20 years. Then, without warning, every camper turned their head toward me at exactly the same time. Every smile disappeared. Every face became pale. Every pair of eyes turned completely black. Together, they whispered one sentence. "Go to sleep." The flames of every campfire exploded into towering columns of blue fire. And from somewhere deep in the forest, a giant bell rang. Dong. The smiling campers vanished. The campground became dark again. Then the loudspeaker on the abandoned ranger office crackled to life. A voice echoed through the empty campground. "Attention campers." There was a long pause. Then, in a slow, distorted voice, it finished. Quiet hours had begun. Quiet hours. The loudspeaker fell silent. Static crackled through the campground. Then the same distorted voice spoke again. "Attention campers. Please remain inside your tents. If you are still awake, it already knows where you are." The speaker went dead. A cold wind swept through the empty campground, making the pine trees groan. I looked at my watch. 3 a.m. The notebook had warned me not to fall asleep, but it had never said anything about staying inside the tent. Something told me the rules weren't complete. Keeping my flashlight pointed ahead, I hurried back to the abandoned ranger office. The front door, which I had left open, was now closed. I pushed it open. The room was darker than before. The maps had disappeared from the walls. The desk had been moved to the center of the room, and someone had lit an old oil lantern. I knew I hadn't done that. On the desk sat another notebook. This one looked much older. Its leather cover was cracked with age. Inside were handwritten entries from the campground's last ranger. June 14th. The campers haven't slept in 2 nights. They say someone circles their tents until sunrise. June 16th. 3 children claim they saw a little girl asking for help. Their parents followed her into the trees. None of them returned. June 18th. We discovered something impossible. It doesn't attack people who stay awake. It waits, patiently, until someone closes their eyes. The final page had only 1 sentence. It enters through dreams. A loud thump came from the roof. Thud. Another. Thud. Thud. Something heavy was walking above me. Slow. Measured. Each step shipped dust from the ceiling. I raised my flashlight toward the rafters. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then came scratching. Long fingernails dragging across old wood. Screech. My pulse raced. Whatever was on the roof began crawling toward the edge. I backed away from the window. Too late. A pale face slowly appeared upside down, outside the glass. It had no eyelids. Its eyes were wide open. Its mouth stretched into a horrible smile. It stared directly at me. Then it whispered through the wind. "Are you getting sleepy?" I stumbled backward. The lantern suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the office. I switched on my flashlight. The face was gone. Outside, the footsteps had returned. Only now there were dozens of them. Hundreds. They circled the ranger office from every direction. I looked through a crack in the boards covering the window. My breath caught in my throat. The campground was full, not with living campers, but with people standing perfectly still beside every abandoned tent. Men, women, children, all staring at the ranger office. None of them blinked. None of them moved. Then, one by one, they lay down on the ground, as if they were going to sleep. The earth beneath them began to ripple. Black hands reached up from the soil. Silently, each sleeping figure was pulled underground. Within seconds, the campground was empty again, except for one person, the little girl in the pink jacket. She stood in the middle of the road, hugging her teddy bear. This time, I could see her face. She wasn't smiling. She was crying. She looked straight at me and whispered, "Don't let it see you sleeping." Before I could answer, her eyes widened in terror. She looked up into the trees behind me. Very slowly, she pointed upward. I turned my flashlight toward the ceiling. The scratching had stopped, because whatever had been on the roof was no longer there. A warm breath touched the back of my neck. Then a voice, only inches from my ear, whispered, "You blinked." The dream catcher. A freezing hand brushed the back of my neck. I spun around, swinging my flashlight through the darkness. Nothing. The ranger office was empty. The whisper had vanished. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear anything else. Then I noticed something impossible. The office door was gone. So were the windows. The room had become a narrow wooden cabin that hadn't existed before. The walls were covered with hundreds of old dream catchers. Some were small. Others were as large as wagon wheels. Every one of them swayed gently, even though there was no wind. From each dream catcher hung tiny photographs. I stepped closer. My blood turned to ice. The photographs showed missing campers. Every face looked terrified. Every picture had been taken while the person was asleep. At the center of the cabin hung the largest dream catcher of all. Its feathers were black instead of white, and trapped inside its web was the little girl in the pink jacket. She wasn't a photograph. She was alive. Barely. Her eyes opened slowly. "You have to destroy it," she whispered. "It steals our dreams." Before I could ask another question, the cabin shook violently. A deep growl echoed from outside. Heavy footsteps circled the walls. 1, 2, 3. Then they stopped directly at the front door. A slow knock echoed through the cabin. Knock, knock, knock. A calm voice spoke from outside. "Ranger Ethan Brooks." My stomach dropped. No one had ever called me a ranger. "You stayed awake long enough. It's time to rest." The doorknob slowly began to turn. The little girl screamed, "Don't open it." The dream catchers all began spinning wildly. The photographs started moving. One by one, the sleeping campers inside them opened their eyes. They all whispered the same words. "Wake up! Please, wake up!" The cabin grew colder. Frost spread across the walls. The doorknob stopped turning. Silence. Then something scratched 4 long lines across the door. Scrappy. A 5th line appeared, as if someone were counting. The little girl covered her ears. "It comes every night. It counts the people who are still awake. If the number reaches 0, it takes the last one." Suddenly, every dream catcher snapped at once. Feathers filled the air. The cabin walls dissolved into darkness. I was no longer inside a building. I was standing in the middle of the abandoned campground again. Only now, every tent was standing upright. Campfires burned brightly. Families laughed around the flames. Children chased each other between the trees. It looked alive, normal, beautiful, until every camper stopped moving. Slowly, they all turned toward me. Every smile disappeared. Their mouths opened impossibly wide. From every throat came the same whisper, "Go to sleep." The ground beneath my feet began to sink. Black soil swallowed my boots. Hands reached up and grabbed my ankles. I struggled, but they pulled harder. Then I heard the little girl's voice one last time. "Ethan, run to Site 27. It's the only place where it can't dream." I ripped 1 foot free and sprinted through the campground. Behind me, hundreds of campers rose from their fires and began walking after me. Not running, walking, slowly, patiently, because they knew, sooner or later, everyone falls asleep. Campsite 27. I ran through the abandoned campground, my lungs burning with every breath. Behind me, hundreds of silent campers followed. They never ran. They didn't need to. No matter how fast I moved, I could still hear their footsteps behind me. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I spotted the faded wooden sign. Site 27. The campsite looked different from all the others. No tent, No picnic table, no fire pit, only a circle of smooth white stones surrounding a massive pine tree. The moment I stepped inside the circle, the footsteps stopped. The campground became silent. I turned around. The campers stood just beyond the white stones. None of them crossed the line. They simply watched. Their black eyes never blinked. Then the crowd slowly parted. A tall figure stepped forward. It wore an old ranger's uniform, faded almost black with age. Its badge was rusted. Its face was hidden beneath the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once. "Leave the circle." I didn't move. "You don't belong here." Still, I stayed silent. The figure lifted its head. Its face wasn't human. It had no eyes, no nose, only a smooth, pale face with a wide, smiling mouth. "I am the Night Ranger," it whispered. "I make sure every camper gets their rest." The smile stretched wider. "No one stays awake forever." The ground beneath the white stones began to glow with faint blue light. Symbols appeared around the circle, carved deep into the earth. A warm breeze swept through the campsite. For the first time since arriving, I felt safe. A gentle voice came from behind a great pine tree. "Ethan." I spun around. An elderly woman stepped into the moonlight. She wore the uniform of a park ranger from decades ago. Her name tag read, Margaret Holloway. "I've been waiting for someone who could resist the dreams," she said. "Who are you?" I asked. "I was the last head ranger of Pine Ridge. I failed." She looked toward the Night Ranger. It wasn't always a monster. My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Margaret sighed. "Long ago, this campground was built over an ancient place where people came to dream and remember their loved ones. But grief changed it. Every person who refused to let go fed the darkness beneath the forest. It became hungry. It learned to trap people inside their dreams." The Night Ranger laughed. A horrible, hollow sound echoed through the trees. "You tell stories," it said. "I tell bedtime stories." The campers behind it began humming a slow lullaby. The melody was strangely beautiful. My eyelids instantly became heavy. I fought to stay awake. Margaret grabbed my shoulders. "Listen to me. Site 27 is the heart circle. It's the only place the dreams cannot enter." She reached into her pocket and handed me an old brass campground whistle. "The first ranger carried this. It wakes the living." I stared at the whistle. Its surface was covered in tiny carved names. Missing campers. Every one of them. The Night Ranger took one slow step toward the circle. The blue symbols flickered. Cracks spread through the glowing stones. "It won't protect you much longer," it whispered. The humming grew louder. The campers began smiling again. One by one, they closed their eyes. As each pair of eyes shut, a shadow rose from their bodies. Hundreds of dark shapes drifted silently into the sky. They gathered above the campground, forming one enormous creature with glowing white eyes. It looked down at me. Then, in a voice that shook the mountains, it spoke. "Ethan Brooks, you've stayed awake long enough." The white stones around Site 27 shattered all at once. The protective circle was gone, and the shadow in the sky began to descend. Sunrise. The shadow fell from the sky like a wave of living darkness. It swallowed the moon. The campground disappeared beneath a black mist. The Night Ranger smiled. "It's over," it whispered. "Everyone sleeps eventually." The cold wrapped around me. My eyelids felt heavier than they ever had before. Every part of my body begged me to close my eyes. Just for 1 second. Margaret grabbed my arm. "Ethan!" The whistle. I looked down at the old brass whistle in my trembling hand. The tiny names carved into it seemed to glow. I raised it to my lips. The night ranger screamed, "No!" I blew as hard as I could. The sound echoed across the entire campground. It wasn't loud. It was clear, pure, like the first breath of morning. Every dream catcher hanging in the trees shattered at once. The black mist trembled. The sleeping campers opened their eyes. For the first time, they looked confused, as if they had just awakened from a nightmare. The giant shadow above us let out a deafening roar. Crags of golden light had spread across its body. The night ranger staggered backward. "You can't wake them," he cried. "They belong to the dream." The brass whistle grew hot in my hand. The carved names began to disappear one by one. Each name became a small golden light that floated into the sky. Around me, the campers smiled, not with the terrifying smiles I had seen before, but with peaceful, human expressions. They slowly faded like morning fog. The little girl in the pink jacket appeared beside Margaret. She hugged her teddy bear and smiled. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she too dissolved into warm golden light. The shadow creature screamed again. Its body split apart. Darkness poured out of it like smoke. The first rays of sunrise broke through the pine trees. The golden light touched the night ranger. It froze. Its terrible smile vanished. The smooth face cracked. Beneath it was an exhausted old man wearing a ranger's uniform. Tears filled his eyes. "I tried," he whispered. "I'm sorry." The sunlight grew brighter. The old ranger closed his eyes. His body drifted away as thousands of tiny glowing particles disappearing into the morning breeze. The campground became silent. Real birds began singing. For the first time, I heard the wind moving through the pines. The nightmare was over. A week later, I returned with state authorities. They found the abandoned Pine Ridge campground exactly where I had left it. The ranger office was empty. The cabins had collapsed decades earlier. There were no dream catchers, no strange symbols, no sign of the night ranger. Only one discovery puzzled everyone. At the center of Site 27, archaeologists uncovered the remains of an old brass whistle. Every carved name had vanished, except one, Margaret Holloway. The investigators asked me if I wanted to revisit the campground after the investigation was complete. I smiled and shook my head. "No, I've had enough camping for one lifetime." As I drove away, I glanced once in the rearview mirror. The entrance sign to Pine Ridge Campground stood quietly beneath the morning sun. For a moment, I thought I saw children laughing between the trees. But this time, they weren't trapped. They were finally going home.